Hi and welcome back to Art with Lee for part 3 of the woodland lake river painting. So today we're going to be working on the side sections and the foreground. So let's crack on with the painting. Okay, so in part 3 we're going to be focusing on the rest of the painting, just popping in some detail of this area here. I have gone back in and put a few more lines in here and broken up the blue a little bit, so I've sort of developed that a little bit, and I might do a little bit more on this, but that will all be done off camera. So I've dabbed in some sort of mid-tone blocked in, if you like, here, but I just want to bring this up a bit, if you see. So I'm just going to use a mixture of colours. I've got that olive green, a bit of the sap green, a bit of Mars black, and just mixed it all up in a palette. These are so good, by the way. This is just a packet that Ham came in, but they're so good for using as a palette. Anyway, there you go, top tip of the day. So I'm just going to go in and put some a bit more definition in terms of the shape I want it. I want it darker at the bottom. In fact, I want it really quite dark in the corners. So I'm just going to go in with that Mars black mixed with some of the olive colour, and don't want anything regular here. This is just going to be quite thick. It's going to sit up in the actual water, just to give some. This is really what we're going to use for the shade between whatever goes here. So it's going to be a mixture of grass and weeds and flowers and bits and pieces, really. So we're going to just dab those in. I usually like to do lighter at the top, come down a bit darker at the bottom, and this is just getting ready for the next stage here, because I want this to dry before I continue with this section. And as you can see, there's no pattern to it. It's just blobbing on colour. It may be slightly too dark, but I'm not especially concerned about that just yet. And this part is one of the parts that I enjoy doing most, and it's the part that probably takes the longest, because you are literally putting in individual blades of grass and individual leaves, but I find this bit of a painting really satisfying. So that, I think, will pretty much do. I just want to lighten the top a bit up here, and then darken the very corners a bit more, almost so it's, yeah, that's better. And same over here. And then just having some of that dark. This is all almost purely Mars black that's going on here. Okay, I think in terms of shape, that's pretty much how I'd want it. I always like to do this. It's a personal choice at the bottom of a painting, because I think that it looks as if it frames the painting by having something in the bottom, and the way it sort of comes up onto the actual painting. Okay, that's good. That's going to dry. What I'm going to do in the meantime is just pick out some highlights over here and just expand upon the rocks a little bit. Now the highlights, I'm not going to put too many in, because I like the way you've got the green and the shade underneath, but I'm just going to get a lighter green using this fan brush that I've cut, so it's not as wide. You can see I've cut the edge off there, so, and I've made it a little bit raggy at the end, because I think on a smaller painting with a full-size fan brush, it just covers too much. So this way I can just go in and pick out some highlights. So I'm going to mix up some paint. I want some nice light green, almost lime green for that. So I'm going to mix up paint. When we come back, I'm going to do this bit. So I've literally used the paint that I had on the palette to do the bottom section, and just mix that with some of that really light yellow that I used for some of the highlights previously. And I'm just lightly going in and just tapping, so you just get a bit of highlight on the grass area. I'm not putting too much paint or pressure on, and I think it looks good when it comes down over the dark shadow like that. I think it looks quite effective. I'm not going to do too much here because I want this bottom section to be where the grass sort of disperses into the riverbank with the stones. So I'm going to be putting a few more stones on there. Don't want to do much more here. My hand's a bit shaky this morning, which doesn't help. Okay, I think that will do for now on the left side. I think that looks quite effective. I'm just going to do the same on the other side, and then after that I'm going to focus on doing some of the rocks on the riverbank. Okay, now I'm going to start and put some of these rocks and stones and pebbles and so on. So just using a mixture of the Mars black with a bit of white, just to pop those stones in. And when I'll probably go over and just put a bit more highlight on some of them when we're done, but they're just sort of popping out over the water's edge. And obviously trying to make them smaller as I go up. I'm just going to put the put the dark on first, and then I will go over, and it sort of thins out a little bit as we get further up, and they obviously become smaller. Did a bit darker. Because if it's too light, then the highlights don't show up as much, in my opinion. And then it just tapers off as it goes around the corner. under the trees, and this will give a bit of definition to the shoreline at the back, I'd imagine. Hopefully I'm not covering this too much with my hand when I'm painting, but it's a bit too light, but I'll dampen that down in a minute. Okay. And then just a slightly lighter mix, just to dab some highlights here and there. On the top of the rocks. And they show up quite bright, but it will tone down as it dries. And then less highlight the further away it gets. Okay. Just popping a bit more dark in here as well. I think now that gives the impression of rocks and stones and all sorts going up the side. So I'm now going to go ahead and do this side now, and then come back. I think we can start working on this bottom section. I'm just going in now and putting some like ripples of water, you know, at the water's edge, and I've done some of this already, but I'll do a bit more. So just a little bit of the white, just to show that the water is sort of coming up against the stones and the rocks, and just sort of extending it a little bit so it sort of goes towards the blue, but I don't want it to be too uniform as if it's all joining up. So I'm just gonna carry on really gently, popping a few highlights in. Okay, so now we have the rocks at the edge of the bank are all in. The grass, I'm quite happy with that, how it is, and also that side I will put just a little bit of detail in there. I did toy with the idea of putting a tree in, but I don't think I'm going to do that now. So the next part of this painting is going to be the bottom. Now I need this to dry out properly before I do that, and I might pick out a few more highlights in the trees. I did a little bit there, but I think I might maybe pop a few more highlights in, but I don't want to overwork this. I don't think we're too far away. I'll get the bottom done, a little bit more detail in terms of sticks and twigs and things like that on the sides, and we'll be very close to having a finished painting. So I'm going to let that dry, have a cup of coffee, and I'll come back. Right, now I'm working on the foliage at the bottom, and I love doing this bit. And this is where you've got the dark base that we put in, the blocking in, and now all I'm doing is just going in and putting some little leaves and little definition in, and I'll just completely lose myself when I'm doing this. It's my favourite part of the painting, I think. I tried to make them as if there's lots of little leaves and things going on down here, and just picking out different colours every now and then. But this is basically all I'm using for this is a blend, or different blends between the hooker's green and that really bright yellow from Hobbycraft that has no name. So I'm just going through and just adding lots of little leaves, and when I've done this I'm going to start putting some twigs and sticks in and things like that, and then maybe at the end we'll pop a few flowers in, because I do like to have a few flowers just so you've got just a little bit of colour on the painting. You know, it's because this is all pretty much yellow and green throughout this painting, so it is nice just to have at the bottom just a little splash of colour with some either white flowers or pink flowers or combination. So it's a good part of the process, and this will take me a long time to do, but it's a pleasure to do. But I think because you've got the background already done, I think it looks really effective. I hope you agree with that. And it's really easy to do, because all you're doing is just painting little blobs that resemble leaves, and watching it come alive. So I'm not going to film a lot of this because it's all pretty much the same thing all the way through, and I don't want this video to be too long, otherwise you'll all lose the will to live, I'm sure. So I'm just going to carry on in my own time, just doing this bit here, and we'll come back. I'll be ready to do some of the detailed twigs and sticks. Right, so that's the leaves and everything done, the foliage, shall we say, all the way across. And I'm just going to try now and just put a few random sticks and twigs, and I'll be using sort of different colours for doing this. This is when I really could do with that ultra fine rigger brush, which hopefully will be delivered in the next couple of days. Quite excited to try that out. And we're just going to go in and sort of dot these around all over the place. I can pop a bit of white in as well, so I think there's too much paint on that. I don't want a blob. And this once again is very time consuming and very fiddly, but it does make a real difference. So I'm just going to do a little bit. On camera, and now I'm just going to sit down and do a load more off camera. So I'm going to carry on doing these sticks and twigs, and we'll come back. We can think about popping some flowers on. And then finally, just to finish off the foreground, I'm going to pop in a few flowers. And these are flowers that are like, I can't remember what they're called, but they're like almost like a cushion of flowers. I think it's more a weed than flower actually, but we won't pass judgment on that. And that's just really just to dab a few spots that make up the flower head. And I will probably go over this again because the white, as it dries, will fade into the background. And I don't think I'm going to use any other colour. I was tempted to use a bit of pink. I may pop a few other colour flower heads in, but just smaller ones. And let's put a few of these in, and it just lifts the front. I always like to put a bit of colour in the front because there tends not to be too much other colour throughout the painting, so it's nice just to pop in a few traces of flower in there. It doesn't need to go all the way along. This is just going to be on the corner here, and maybe even maybe even some on the other corner. There are a few flower stems along here, so I'm just going to make the most of those. Like that. I did more than I thought. Got a bit carried away. I don't want to put too many in. So I'm just going to go on and finish up with the flowers, and then we'll pretty much have a completed painting. And there we have a pretty much finished painting. I might go in and just tweak a few little bits, certainly for the purpose of this. I'm going to call this finished, and I hope you've enjoyed watching. I've really enjoyed painting this, and I may be back soon to paint another one. So thanks for watching, guys. You all take care, my friends. Bye bye now.